What's up guys, it's Josh from KeepItTechie, and today I want to do a quick video showing you guys how to set up and use LXD on Ubuntu 20.04. Okay, so what is LXDs? Pretty much LXDs are operating system virtualization. And the way it works is by creating containers, which are considered a grouping of processes that are isolated from the rest of the system through the Linux kernel security features, such as namespaces and control groups. It's very similar to virtual machines. The only difference is it removes the hypervisor level when it comes to virtualization. And it also leverages the kernel while creating those containers. So you don't have to install a full operating system in order to use containers. It will use the main operating system's kernel. So this makes things much more lightweight than running a full virtualization system similar to VirtualBox or VMware. And just to give a quick example of how it actually works, let's say you have a web server with multiple websites on it. Well, in order to satisfy all those sites and keep them up and going, you have to create what they call a virtual host within Apache. This allows you to host multiple websites on one server. Well, if we leverage LXCs and LXDs, you can set up each website on its own container. And everything is compartmentalized and everything is bundled up with all the application as well as all the dependencies within that container. And it'll leverage the kernel to actually run. So as I stated in the intro to the video, I want to go down and show you guys how to set this up and actually use it in Ubuntu 20.04. It's a very simple process. I'll walk you through it and we'll create a couple of containers so you guys can see how to actually use it. So let's get started. Okay, so for this demonstration, I already have the virtual machine up and running. This is the same server I used on my last video, which is Ubuntu Server 20.04, and I'm connected to it via SSH. But first off, let me explain. LXD is already installed in Ubuntu. It just really needs to be configured appropriately before you can actually use it on the server. You simply have to set up user accounts to manage the containers, then configure the type of storage backend to store the containers and configure the networking. So let's start off by setting up the user account to actually manage the containers. And the way we do that, we can simply take my user account, which is Josh, and add it to the LXD group. And the command to do that is sudo user mod -- append and then -- group, and we want to put LXD and we want to add Josh to that group. So we can press enter on that. And there weren't any errors, so that means that it added it successfully. And we can also check, and I'll go through and check by showing you guys the command is basically groups and then the user account, and press enter. They'll show you all the groups that Josh is added to. So LXD is that group I need to be added to in order to manage the LXCs or the containers without running sudo. Okay, so now that that's done, the next thing we need to configure is the storage backend. And for LXDs, Ubuntu recommends you use the ZFS file system to store the containers. And so therefore we have to add a utility to Ubuntu in order to handle this. So the way you do that is by let's run a sudo apt update just to refresh the repositories. And once that's done, we need to install ZFS utils. So let me type that in right fast. So it's sudo apt install ZFS, and we'll tab it out so you guys can see the package that needs to be installed, and it's ZFS utils -Linux. So we type that in and press enter. And I will go through and install ZFS utilities. And let's wait for that to finish. It shouldn't take too long to install this, but we need that installed before we initialize LXD, which is actually the next step. So let's give it a couple seconds. This shouldn't take too long, and we'll get it started. Okay, so ZFS utilities has been installed. So let's go down and clear this, but then let's initialize LXD. And the command to do that is simply sudo LXD and init, basically for initialize. And it'll step you through the process of actually configuring the server. So let's give it a second. It'll bring up a couple prompts for us to actually respond to. And the first thing it'll ask you is if you want to set up LXD clustering. And the default is no. I'm going to select no because we don't need to set up clustering for this. And then the next question, it'll ask you, do you want to configure a new storage pool? And the default is yes, so we don't have to actually do anything but press enter here as well, because we want to select the default, which is yes. I do want to configure a new storage pool. Okay, and then the next thing it'll ask you is name of the new storage pool, which I'm going to use the default, which is fine. We could press enter here as well. Now this is the part where you want to set up ZFS, and it says name of the storage backend to use. So we want to use ZFS. So let's press enter here, and that'll name it ZFS. And then we want to create a new ZFS pool. So the default is yes there as well. And like I said, all these questions are kind of geared to ZFS because Ubuntu typically wants you to use ZFS when working with clusters. So let's press enter here as well. And then this question will ask, would you like to use an existing block device? And let's press no because this is a new one. And then here is where it wants to ask you the size you want to use for the loop device, and the default is 15 gigabytes. I'm gonna press enter on that. That's fine. I believe I have enough space for that, and this is mainly because you want to pre-allocate enough space so that you'll have at least 10 gigabytes of free space remaining once you create a container. And so that's why they recommend 15 gigs, which is fine. We'll run it that way. Next question, would you like to connect to a MAD server? And the default is no. I'm gonna select no because I don't need to. And this next question is a very important question. This wants to ask you if you would like to create a new local network bridge. And the default is yes, and that's what we want to select. This is pretty much configuring the network for you. So if we press yes or enter here, and then it'll create a new bridge for you. It'll come up with its own name, which is LXD BR0. And we can press enter on that because that's a good name for it. And here you can actually set up the IP addresses if you want to, or the actual address range. But I'm gonna leave it on auto, so it'll automatically generate our IP version 4 addresses. You may need to change that if you need to, but I won't for this demonstration. So let's press enter, and same thing for IP version 6. Just press enter there. And this will ask you, would you like LXD to be available over the network? And I'm going to use the default, which is no. I don't care if it's available on the network. So let's press enter here. And this is a cool feature that they added to the latest version of LXD. It will automatically update your cached images. And we'll get to that in a second when we actually download an image and create a container. But what happens is when you first create a container, you have to pull down an image from a repository. And then once it's pulled down, it'll store it locally. It'll cache it locally. So this will allow the system to automatically update those cached images that you have. And the purpose for caching the image is so you can quickly download it or quickly create a container in the future using that same image if you need to. So we can press enter here. And this right here will ask you, would you like a YAML LXD init pre-seed to be printed? And default is no. So I'm going to go with no. And cool, we have successfully set up LXD. We configured the storage and we configured the networking of the actual LXD, so we can start creating containers. So let me go on and start by showing you guys how to actually create some containers. One thing I wanted to let you guys know that LXD, it has two separate commands. The LXD is for the daemon and the LXC is for the actual containers. So we have to start running new commands, and these commands are specifically for containers. The only time you really have to go into LXD is when you're doing configuration of the actual daemon or the back end of the containers. Like I said, it handles the storage, which we went through that whole configuration, as well as the networking of all the containers. And so the first command I want to show you guys is how to actually list out containers if we had containers. And so that command is LXC list. And also, just to add this into this part, that was the reason for us adding ourselves or adding our account to the LXD group, because we don't have to run LXC commands using sudo. So now we can run them all without sudo, the LXC commands. So let's press enter here. And this is pretty much what it'll show you. And I don't know if you guys remember my Docker video, but it's pretty similar by showing you the name, the state, the IP addresses, version 4, version 6, the type, and snapshots, if you had any snapshots. Okay, and before I create a container, I want to go down and show you guys how to actually list container images that you may want to pull down. And the way you do that is by running the command LXC image, and then list. And let's say we want to look at all of Ubuntu images. So let's Ubuntu and then colon and press enter. And this will list out the images that are available to you. And I'm not going to go through and show you all these. But as you can see, there's a whole bunch of Ubuntu containers out there. They have even Ubuntu 16. I think I've seen 15.10. If you want to download that, then 18.4 LTS ORM. So they got a whole bunch of different containers out here you can play around with and actually download and test out software or whatever you're trying to build it for. But I want to create a web server or Apache web server. So I'm going to use 18.04. I already know what it is, so I'm going to type it in right fast, and this is the command to actually create the container. And actually, let me clear so I can bring this up to the top, but it's LXC launch, and then Ubuntu, and then we want to use I want to use 18.04, and then let's name it. And what you want to do is name your containers. This is something that I always do. So let's name it web serve. And press enter, and then this will go on and create that container. It'll download the image and store it locally or cache it locally, and then create the container for you. And let's give it a couple of seconds. Shouldn't take too long to create it. Okay, so now that it is done creating that container, let's go down and list them out so we can see what's what. So if we type LXC list again and press enter, this will list out whatever containers that we have available. And as you can see, it has that's the name of it, web serve, which is what I created it, and then the state it's running, as well as the IP address, IP version 4, and then IP version 6, and then the type is container, and the snapshot, it has 0 snapshots. So okay, so now let me show you guys how to actually configure this container if we want to. You have to actually connect to the container. And it's not like SSH, you actually running the LXC command. And that command is LXC and then exec, basically execute. And then we want to go to the web serve container. And we want to type -- sudo. And then -- login, and then dash dash user. And we want to use this default user account, which is Ubuntu. This is in most of the Ubuntu containers that I've created. So it always has a Ubuntu account with sudo privileges and all that stuff. So all you have to do is type that in as the user, and you'll see we connect to it. And sorry about that, I misspoke. I forgot to put the space in there, but when you type dash dash, you have to put a space and then sudo, and then dash dash login with no space, and then dash dash user with no space, and then the account, which is Ubuntu. So as you can see, we're connected to this container, and as you can see, my login name is Ubuntu, and then the name of the container is WebServe. So we're connected to it. It almost looks like a SSH connection, which is pretty cool. So now we can go through and actually work with this system just like it was the host OS. We can actually update it. So if we go sudo apt updates, press enter, it'll actually update the system for you. And then instead of upgrading it, I see that it has 15 packages, which is fine. I'm gonna go down and install Apache right fast. So let's go sudo apt install Apache, and I believe it's Apache 2. Yeah, Apache 2. So press enter on that, and this will go down and install Apache for us and get it set up for us. And like I stated, it's just like any other, OS. It's almost like a virtual machine, but without the hypervisor. That middle layer hypervisor is not there. So, and it's leveraging the kernel of the host OS to actually, handle this. So it's pretty cool. Let me go down there. I'm gonna skip ahead because I don't want you guys waiting around until Apache installs. So I'll skip ahead. I'll be back in a second. Okay, so Apache has been installed. So let's go on and test out that Apache is actually running. And let me check one thing before I get out of here, because I'm not sure if uncomplicated firewall, it may be turned on. I just want to make sure it's not. So uncomplicated firewall, and then let's check the status of it. And it's inactive. Cool. So the port should be open for this server. So let me go down and check it. I'm gonna go down and disconnect from this container. And the way you do that, I want to show you that command as well. Is simply log out. So you can just type log out, press enter. Now we're back on the host machine. And let's type clear right fast because I want to give it enough room so you guys can actually see. First off, let me run LXC list again. And really what I want to do is get the IP address. So this is the internal IP address for the container. So I want to copy that because what I want to do is show you that Apache is working. So let's clear this. And then let's run the curl command. And let's try looking at it. I think it's dash dash verbose, and then we want to put the IP address. So let's go http:// and then the IP address of that container, / again, and press enter. So if we scroll up to the top, this will let us know that we actually connected to it. So as you can see, it's trying that IP address on port 80. And as you can see, it connected to that IP address at port 80. And then it started pulling the Apache information on it. So this is simply that Apache website that'll pop up, basically letting you know that Apache was installed. And I wish I had a browser, but this thing is in... But these containers are installed on a server, so it doesn't have a desktop environment, so I can't pull up any browser to actually get to it unless I go through and start opening up ports and doing the port forwarding for containers, which I wanted to do to save that for another video. Lastly, I want to go down and show you guys how to actually stop and remove a container. This will be the final step, and the command to actually stop the container that we created is simply LXC stop and then the name of the container. So we named it web serve, and we press enter, and it'll actually stop that container for us. Okay, so we could check it right fast. Let's go LXC list, and this will let us know that the web server is in the stop state, so we should be good to go. And lastly, I want to show you guys how to actually delete it, and it's pretty simple. It's simply LXC delete and deletes, and then web serve, and press enter. That'll delete that LXC or that container for us. And if we run LXC list again, we'll see that that container has been deleted. Cool. So lastly, before I stop the video, I wanted to go down and show you guys some of the other features of LXC. A lot of the other commands I didn't show you. I just went through and showed you the basics of it. But the way you access the rest of the, or you access the help, you just type LXC help, and this will list out a lot of the other options that you can go through and run. But what I showed you is pretty much the basics. I didn't want to go too deep, like showing you guys snapshots, which is not that hard to do, but I'll save that for another video. Just wanted to show you guys the basics of actually working with containers and LXD, you know, configuring LXD as well as working with the containers, the basic commands. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, leave a comment down in the boxes below, and of course, keep it techie.